Welcome into another episode of Locked On Phillies. And I've been hearing some weird chatter about Rob Thomson being on the hot seat. Today, we'll discuss whether or not the Phillies manager's seat is heating up heading into 2025.
You are Locked On Phillies, your daily Philadelphia Phillies podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Yes, this is Locked On Phillies. I'm your host, Connor Thomas. Thank you so much for joining us today. We come to you as part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. You may know me from some of my other work in the sports talk space. I've been on air over at 97.5 The Fanatic, doing sports talk radio here in Philadelphia for 5 years. I've been a credentialed Philadelphia Phillies media member for 3 seasons, and I've been the host of Locked On Phillies for 4 years now. Please make sure that you're rating and reviewing if you're listening to this in podcast form. We're available wherever you get your podcasts. And also check us out on the YouTube if you haven't done that yet. If you are, go to the Locked On Phillies YouTube channel, hit that subscribe button. It gets you notifications when new episodes are posted. It's free. It's easy. It really helps us out here on Locked On Phillies. So if you enjoy the content, it's a super easy way for you to, one, keep up with it, I should say. And 2, go ahead and help us out a little bit. It's very simple to do. So I appreciate everyone who's done that and everyone who's going to be doing that. And in today's episode, we're going to start by breaking down this conversation about Rob Thomson potentially being on the hot seat for the Philadelphia Phillies in 2025. I'll explain to you why I think he's not going to be. We're also going to talk a little bit about Cristopher Sanchez's season coming up. Had a great year in 2024, breakout year. How does he follow that up after getting the contract extension midseason last year? And Joe Ross, one of the newest bullpen members for the Philadelphia Phillies, he's got an interesting throwing plan down there in spring training. What does it say about him? What does it say about some other players on the roster that, he could take a role from? So we'll discuss all of that in today's episode. But let's start with this Rob Thomson thing, because this is fascinating to me. People who think that Rob Thomson could be on the hot seat in 2025. Now, I got to give credit to my coworkers over at 97.5 The Fanatic, specifically Bill Colarulo, who's on the Mike Missinelli show on middays. I was talking to him today when we got done the morning show, and he asked me about the topic. And I was like, well, I'll tell you, I think it's crazy to say that Rob Thomson is on the hot seat this year. But I know that there's a lot of fans that will think that or will jump on that narrative, and that's totally fine. Like, I'm not saying you guys are wrong. My opinion is that it's crazy. But I was like, yo, go for it. If you want to do that for your show today for middays, as long as I can steal it for Locked On Phillies. So we shook hands and went our separate ways. And the reason why I think it's crazy is this, right? So Rob Thomson, since taking over for Joe Girardi back in the middle of the 2022 season, made the playoffs, went to the World Series with the team not remotely expected to get there. There was a fringe playoff team to begin with. In 2023, he follows that up by going to the NLCS. Now, did the team absolutely choke it away against the Diamondbacks? Yes. Did Rob Thomson make some questionable bullpen decisions with Craig Kimbrell? Also, yes. But managing in the NLCS, I mean, that's a heck of an accomplishment in just your second year if you even wipe the World Series out. Going World Series, NLCS appearance in your first 2 years as manager of a team, especially when you took over midseason, that's pretty darn impressive. Last year, the Philadelphia Phillies went 95 and whatever the equivalent of that is in losses. They won the NL East for the first time in 13 years. They got a first-round bye in the postseason. They had the second-best record in all of baseball. They got bounced by the Mets in the divisional round, right? Like an immediate kick in the nuts by one of your division rivals. I'm not going to defend that. I'm not going to defend Rob Thomson's postseason decision-making at points. Now, I don't think this past year was on him. I do think the World Series, he made a bad decision in that final game where he took Zach Wheeler out and Jose Alvarado came in, and then Yordan Alvarez, we know what happens there. But listen, if the guy's coaching in spots or managing in spots where you have the opportunity to make World Series type decisions, NLCS type decisions, playoff type decisions, he's doing something right. In 3 years, Rob Thomson has accomplished more than every other manager currently in the division besides Brian Snitker down there in Atlanta. And like, that's the only reason, and Snitker is kind of on the hot seat, I guess you could say too, which I think is dumb by Braves fans. But the only reason he's on the hot seat is kind of like that old Philadelphia Eagles, Andy Reid type thing, where he's just been a good coach somewhere for so long, but they haven't climbed over the hump recently, even though they did win a World Series relatively recently. So people are just kind of getting tired of it. The fan base tires of good but not great, or great but not World Series faster than a front office does. The realistic idea here is that there are a lot of worse options out there, significantly worse options than Rob Thomson when you look at what the guy does as far as winning baseball games. I'm not telling you to be satisfied with winning the division, because I know the World Series is going to be the expectation with this team for the foreseeable future. It's not a, hey, value what you have here, guys. This is okay. Not everyone can win the World Series. No, screw that. I want to see this team win the World Series. I'm with you in that. But you can't just, if you don't accomplish that major goal that only one team does, you can't just say, well, trade everybody, fire everybody, get rid of the manager. All he's done here is win in the regular season, put you in position to have good postseason runs. And while Rob Thomson has made tough decisions in a couple postseason series, I would put a lot more of the Phillies' postseason struggles on, this team needs to figure out how to stop getting themselves out in the biggest points of the season. It's on the hitters. It's on the pitchers. It's on the guys that actually play the game. Like last year, Rob Thomson could have made any decision he wanted with the bullpen against the New York Mets. If every guy's going to go out there and just give up hard contact and bombs and stuff, you're not going to win. And it's not on the manager. It's on those pitchers. If in previous years against the Diamondbacks, if nobody's going to hit at home with 2 games to go to the World Series on the line, what are we even doing here? You want Rob Thomson to grab a bat? I don't think he's hitting 99. All due respect to Rob Thomson, a solid catcher back in the day. He's not going to step in the box anymore, guys. So there's only so much a manager can do. So that's part of the reason why he's not on the hot seat, is the sustained success that he's had here in Philadelphia as far as winning significantly more than he loses. But also, we haven't had a locker room issue since Rob Thomson's been here. We haven't had a discontented player outside of Taijuan Walker after the 2023 postseason saying he was upset he didn't pitch. And how'd that go for you in 2024? You were one of the worst pitchers in like the history of the sport in a single season. So it's just like, he's held the team together. The players respect him. They more than respect him. They seem to like him. They seem to love to play for him. And then he wins. I don't understand why people are so quick to try and put Rob Thomson out on the street. And if you do, there aren't really guys waiting in the wings that are like these great managers that are going to, in their first appearance as Phillies manager, take the Phillies to the World Series. Like, that's a rarity in the sport. People forget, because of how Rob Thomson took over for Joe Girardi and just immediately experienced success, there's normally a learning curve for a new manager of a team, whether they've managed before or whether they've not managed anywhere. Whenever you come to a new city, you got to give guys time to kind of feel out what the locker room is like, how they want to do stuff, get the players to buy in. And that's not always the easiest thing. Rob Thomson has that already. So do you want to rebuild from scratch, or do you want to take a World Series contending roster and keep them with a World Series contending manager? Because I'd rather do the latter. I'm not telling you Rob Thompson's the perfect manager. I'm telling you that you can't really, like, basically what you have is you have on, let's say we're playing blackjack, and the Philadelphia Phillies with Rob Thomson as their manager have a 19 on the table, right? You're trying to get 21 if you've never played blackjack before. But if you go over 21, you automatically lose. It would be like firing Rob Thomson to try and change the culture of this team would be like hitting on a 19 in blackjack. Sure, you could get 21. You could get a better situation, but there's one card in the deck. Sorry, 2 cards if you count an ace that gets you to that or closer to that. Like, it's just not a high probability that you're going to remove this guy and bring in somebody who's better right now. Now, if you want to do long-term, absolutely. And another part of this is, like, if Rob Thomson was 40 years old and this guy was going to coach forever, and it was just like, okay, well, we've got to make a decision on whether or not this guy gets a long-term deal, like a 5-year contract to be the manager of the Philadelphia Phillies, that makes it a different conversation, because then you have to say, well, for the next 5 years, is this guy going to lead our franchise in the right direction? I have a theory on Rob Thomson that I'll just throw out here, because the Phillies extended him this offseason through 2026, right? He would have been going into his final year. They gave him an extra year on top of it. What I think is going to happen with Rob Thomson is I think he's going to manage the team this year, and then he's going to kind of go to the organization and say, hey, next year's going to be my last one before I retire. He's already talked about retirement multiple times before even becoming the Phillies manager. I know he's like reinvigorated in his career by becoming a manager. He never thought you would get this position after spending a lot of time in the Yankees organization in lower positions on the coaching staff. But I don't think that Rob Thomson has a lifetime of baseball ahead of him. And I'm not pushing him out, right? I'm just saying, like, I think that the end of his managing career on his own terms is going to come sooner rather than later. So it's not a retirement gig for him. Let him have it because he's only got a couple more years managing. No, the second he starts losing games, I'm all on the get somebody in here who's going to win train. But Rob Thomson wins. He wins, and his players play for him. And you haven't heard a bad word out of the locker room about him. And you haven't heard a bad word out of the organization about him. And I think Rob Thomson is a guy that can win a World Series with his managing style. He's not the perfect manager, but very few guys in the history of baseball ever are. So you got a guy that's probably going to leave on his own volition in a couple of years. A guy who's only won here, and I know you got postseason struggles. Part of that is on him. Part of that's on the team, and I'd say the larger part is on the players that actually play the game. And you've got a guy that doesn't cause any type of problems whatsoever. Like, he is who you want a baseball manager to be, in my opinion. Very Charlie Manuel-esque. A little bit easier to understand when he talks. But bottom line is, I love Charlie too. But they're the same guy. And Charlie got the World Series pretty early on, I guess, into his career as manager of the Philadelphia Phillies, which kind of helped back up his coaching resume. But Rob Thomson has been darn good. So the whole, is he on the hot seat this year, going into a year where they could make the 4 straight postseason push? They're the defending division champions. They just won 95 games last year. They are poised to win 90 plus again. They are a World Series contending team. They have a talented roster, and like all the guys want to play for Rob Thomson. Unless they go out and they like win 80 games or less this year, Rob Thompson's going to be the manager of this team. And if they do end up saying at the end of this year, hey, we're going to part ways, I think a lot of that will be led by Rob Thomson saying, yeah, I don't want to do this anymore. I don't think the Phillies are going to be like quick to trigger to say, Rob Thomson, you're fired. I don't see that from Dave Dombrowski. I don't see that from John Middleton. I don't feel that from the players. I think there'd be a player mutiny if they fired Rob Thomson, unless he has like a major misstep, or he's kind of saying, no mas, I'm done managing. So for all the fans who are on the fire topper train, or have been in the past, or are ready to pick up their pitchforks and torches the second that he makes a questionable bullpen decision this year, just take my 2 cents for it. He's not on the hot seat. He's not going to be on the hot seat this year. Rob Thomson is totally fine. It's why they gave him the extension through 2026, because they're comfortable with him as the manager of the Philadelphia Phillies. Coming up next, someone you may or may not be comfortable with, Cristopher Sanchez. Had an amazing year last year, but it was that breakout performance. And with every breakout performance comes the question of, what's the encore performance like? Well, we're going to discuss that coming up next, and how the Phillies' newest extended starting pitcher looks heading into the season. We will discuss that coming up as we continue today's episode of Locked On Phillies. Let's talk about wonderful pistachios, though. They're better than wonderful. My goodness. If you're looking for a snack that's both delicious and nutritious, crack into a good source of protein with wonderful pistachios. Wonderful pistachios is one of the highest protein nuts. Each 1 ounce serving has 6 grams of protein, giving you over 10% of your daily value. Plus, they're packed with fiber and better for you unsaturated fats to help keep you feeling fuller longer. They're the ultimate snack. Personally, I love the no shells version. It's so much easier for me to eat them. Now, if you like cracking the shells, great. Maybe you're one of the people that goes to like baseball games and you get the sack of peanuts from the concession stand. I almost said convenience store. And you like to crack into the peanuts and throw them on the ground. Too messy for me. I like the no shells option. But if you like the shells on, they got it. They got a bunch of different varieties that you got to check out. All of them packed with those wonderful protein numbers and a great, great taste. So go ahead and check them out. Get snackin' and get crackin' with a snack that packs a protein punch. Visit wonderfulpistachios.com to learn more. That's wonderfulpistachios.com. All right, so this Cristopher Sanchez conversation is a lot of conjecture. I'll tell you that flat out, honestly. Like, I don't know how Cristopher Sanchez is going to pitch this year. I'm not going to pretend like I have a crystal ball to see his numbers, but I've seen a lot of baseball, so I have educated guesses. I'm willing to give you my best. So Cristopher Sanchez in 2024 was awesome. He even got a Cy Young vote Now, he finished like, I don't know, 12th or something in the Cy Young voting. But the fact that, might have even been lower than that, the fact that he got a vote from somebody is a remarkable sign of the year that he came out of nowhere to have. Ranger Suarez had a great year. Zach Wheeler had one of the best years in baseball. Aaron Nola had a low-key great year, like an underrated, strong season from Aaron Nola. But Cristopher Sanchez was the guy, when everything was all said and done, that stole the show. Because, one, he was unexpected. Now, Ranger Suarez kind of was too, but Ranger Suarez fell apart in the middle of the season. Cristopher Sanchez had sustained levels of success throughout the regular season and looked pretty darn good in the postseason as well. A moment that did not seem too big for him when he stepped on the mound for the Philadelphia Phillies against the New York Mets in the divisional round. So I liked what I saw from Cristopher Sanchez in the regular season, in the postseason, the makeup of the guy. It's incredible, honestly, that the Philadelphia Phillies found 4 pitchers with 0 personality. Like, all due respect. And I mean this, like, I don't mean off the field, but I mean on the field. Zach Wheeler has never blinked when pitching. Aaron Nola, I'm not sure, forms a thought when pitching. Ranger Suarez, it could get 150 hit back at him, and he wouldn't even crack a smile or a wince. And Cristopher Sanchez, I don't know, man. I don't know what his personality is like, because none of these guys show it on the mound. They're just stone cold killers. Now, we'll see what Jesus Luzardo brings as far as temperament to the Phillies rotation. But could the Phillies rotation be the most boring in baseball and also the most talented in baseball? It's a possibility. And I mean that in the best way. When you're on the field for competition, some guys say, hey, I don't got time for emotions. I just go out there and do my thing, win this ball game, and we'll party in the clubhouse afterwards. I'll crack jokes later when I'm not having a start. Like, I'm not saying these guys are boring guys. I'm saying on the mound, they're boring personality-wise, it seems. And let's get it back to Cristopher Sanchez, who is another one of these Philly robot pitchers that just goes out there and chucks and dominates. Well, his Terminator pitch, if he is indeed a robot from the future that's sent to demolish opposing hitters, is his changeup. And it was one of the best pitches in baseball this past year. Absolutely insanely talented with that changeup. Just falls off the table, little arm side run. It's very, very hard to pick up because he tunnels it so well with his fastball. Like, that Cristopher Sanchez changeup is legitimately, like, you can argue it's one of the best pitches in baseball. And that's a good thing, but it's also an indicator of what he needs to continue to do. Because you could have the best pitch in the history of forever. Like, I don't know what the best pitch in the history of baseball is. Like, is it Nolan Ryan's fastball? Is it like Mariano Rivera's cutter? It could be Tim Wakefield's knuckleball, if you love the way that he used to throw that, or Phil Necro's knuckleball. But whatever you think it is, even the best pitch in the history of baseball, there have been guys that can square it up. No pitch is unhittable, no matter how much it might seem like it from sitting on your sofa at home or watching the Phillies try and hit it in the postseason. That was unfair. But anyway, people are going to figure out Cristopher Sanchez's changeup a little bit more the more they see it. So the next step of Cristopher Sanchez's journey is going to be, how do you develop the pitches around that? Maybe do you bring in another pitch? Do you learn another one? We've seen that in the past with Zach Wheeler developing a sinker, right? And what that does for his overall repertoire of pitches. Did I say repertoire weird? I was watching the Court of Gold thing on the French Olympics, the Paris Olympics, and there's a lot of French words in there, so I might be saying stuff weird today. But Cristopher Sanchez is a guy that I think has the work ethic needed to develop another pitch. I really trust Caleb Cotham to work on that. We had an episode at the end of the season for the Phillies when we were like evaluating people and coaches and players, where I talked about Caleb Cotham. And I'm like, this dude is low-key super underrated with what he's done with his pitching staff since being the pitching coach here. He's helped develop pitches. He's helped create new pitches. He's helped keep guys focused on new roles or old roles or ups and downs of a career. So if anyone can prime Cristopher Sanchez mentally to go back out there, it's absolutely Caleb Cotham. Like, I love what he's done. So all of the signs point to, I don't think this Cristopher Sanchez thing was just a flash in the pan. And the Phillies giving him an extension while he's still arbitration eligible, cutting down years of team control to go ahead and say, okay, we're going to pay you now to make sure that you're here for the long term. Well, that says something about the pitcher, but it also says more to me about the makeup of the player. Like if you have a good pitcher where you're like, I don't know how he works. I don't know what his personality is like. I don't know if his teammates like him. You're excited to have him, but you might not be like, we're going to commit to you when we don't have to. We'll see things out. And if everything works out, we'll commit to you when the time's right. When you give these pre-set up extensions, like we see the Atlanta Braves do so much to players, the belief there is not just that you have a talented baseball player, but you have a guy that's projectable due to the work ethic and due to the character that he has. So that's a good sign from the Phillies, who seem to have a really good knack for building a great locker room and picking players that are willing to work together and fit well as a team. So I don't see anything, right? I don't see anything at all that tells me Cristopher Sanchez is going to have a down year in 2025. Now, he might not pitch to the level that he did in 2024 because, again, people are going to get tape on him. Injuries could be a thing. He was healthy in 2024. But I don't think there's this like major fall off coming for him. And for a guy that could be the number 4 pitcher in your rotation, that's a pretty darn good thing to have. So if you're looking at Cristopher Sanchez to continue to like grow into this elite level pitcher, I don't know that we're going to see a year that's possibly better than 2024. I would not bet on that. But I wouldn't bet on one that's significantly worse. I think maybe a slight regression following the breakout year, but still a guy that you love to have in the middle of the rotation. That would be my guess for Cristopher Sanchez's 2025 season. Coming up next, we're going to talk about a guy that we really haven't talked about all that much that's going to be in an important spot in the bullpen. And the reason we haven't really talked about him all that much is because, well, he came here from Milwaukee via free agency, but Joe Ross has an interesting role. And it's interesting for him, but also some other pitchers in the organization. We'll talk about it coming up as we continue today's episode. But I want to talk to you about SelectQuote. In sports, having a winning strategy is everything. It's how the best teams make it to the Super Bowl or the World Series or the Olympics. The same goes for life. Having a strategy like life insurance from SelectQuote can protect your financial legacy and keep your family's future secure. SelectQuote makes it easy to find the perfect life insurance policy. As one of America's leading insurance brokers with nearly 40 years of experience, they've helped over 2 million customers find, get ready for this, $700 billion, with a B, billion in coverage since 1985. What sets SelectQuote apart is their personal touch. Unlike other brokers that offer these one-size-fits-all policies, their licensed agents tailor coverage to fit your unique needs. If you're in good health, you might even qualify for same-day coverage of up to $5 million. No medical exam required, and it's more affordable than you'd think. You can get up to $1 million in coverage for as little as $20 a month. That's chump change for a great policy with SelectQuote. So get the right life insurance for you for less at SelectQuote.com/lockedon. Go to SelectQuote.com/lockedon today to get started. That's SelectQuote.com/lockedon. SelectQuote. They shop, you save. All right, so Joe Ross is an interesting character in the onset of the Philadelphia Phillies spring training and later the 2025 season. I know that makes me sound like I'm talking about like a Marvel character or something, or like a mystery novel. But Joe Ross's future with the Philadelphia Phillies kind of is a mystery novel. What role will he play? Who is he in the story? How prepared is he to play that role? Where does he come from? Where is he going to? There are a lot of Phillies fans that don't really know exactly who Joe Ross is. And I'm not going to pretend like I've run the Joe Ross fan club for the past decade or whatever. He's new to us, but not new to baseball. So with the Brewers, he was a guy that could get stretched out a little bit, that could be more of a long reliever, and also has the opportunity to be a swingman. And that's his biggest value to the Philadelphia Phillies. The Phillies desperately needed that guy this offseason because Matt Strahm last year cemented himself as a guy that's not a long reliever. No, he is a high leverage guy that's going to be an all-star caliber arm for this bullpen if things go to plan. He had been the swing guy in the past. Spencer Turnbull's no longer here. Michael Lorenzen had been that guy in the past, but he is long gone. So who is going to be that guy that if and when a starter goes down, and it's a when, because nobody makes it through an entire season with all 5 starters healthy all the way through. It's just not possible in Major League Baseball. It's not realistic. I never want to say nothing's possible because we see crazy, crazy stuff in sports all the time. But I'm going to tell you it's basically impossible for all 5 starters to throw all season long, not miss any starts, not have any injuries, no one else makes a start. Like, that's not going to happen. So you have to have contingency plans. And one of those proper contingency plans is having a guy in the Major League bullpen that can make a spot start for you here and there. Now, the Phillies are going a step further than that. They're working Joe Ross out like a starter in spring training. His role is still in the bullpen. He will still be in the bullpen on opening day, but they're going to treat him as a starter so that if you have injury issues early on in the season or at any point in the season, he is ready to go. So the hierarchy for guys that are going to step into the depth role in the starting rotation right now, as I see it, you got Wheeler, Nola, Suarez, Sanchez, and Jesus Luzardo. Whenever any one of those guys goes down, it seems like the first guy they're going to go to is Joe Ross, right? That seems most likely to be the option. If Joe Ross is great, and you have him out there for a while until that guy comes back. If Joe Ross isn't cutting it, or if another guy goes down, hopefully that's not until June that we have to worry about something like that. Like, hopefully you get through the first 2 months with guys healthy, but you never know. The next guy I would say at that point would be Andrew Painter. But if you have multiple injury issues early in the season, that's where the Philadelphia Phillies are going to run into a problem, because Painter's not going to be ready to just jump into the majors in April, right? They're not going to want to do that to him. So you're going to have to survive the first couple months with Joe Ross, and then maybe a guy like Michael Mercado, who could end up in the final spot in the bullpen and could also be one of those long relief guys. Remember, he was a starter last year in the minors. He moved up to the bullpen a couple times. Like, he's been both, so a little bit less proven than Joe Ross, who has done this at the major league level before. But Michael Mercado made some starts last year, and he wasn't terrible. Maybe experience will add to him, but you can't really count on much there. The upside of Painter is when you do call him up, if he's a monster, you're probably not sending him back down. You're probably going to go 6-man from there, or find a spot for him in some way to be a part of this rotation, because you don't want to stunt the guy's development. And if he's as good as I think he's going to be, as good as a lot of scouts think he's going to be impossible to send down. I'm not saying he's Paul Skeens. I'm saying he's going to be very talented, and it's going to be very hard to take that guy off of a World Series contending roster. But over that guy, Joe Ross is going to get the first crack because of health and because of experience. So what does that mean for other guys? Well, it means that a guy like Taijuan Walker basically has no way to make this team. If you're already working out Joe Ross as a starter, you already know that not only is he on the team and in the bullpen, but he's going to be a starting depth piece for you. You already have your 5 men in the rotation. None of those 5 guys are not making the team. Like, there's a 0% chance that those guys are not on the opening day roster. So what is Taijuan Walker going to do? There's no other spot in the bullpen open unless you're going to be a short-term reliever. And he hasn't been a reliever, and I don't trust him in that role, and I don't think he wants to be in that role. He doesn't seem like a guy that's going to want to go to the minors. So he'll probably be either released or traded or something like that. But them using Joe Ross as a starter is basically saying, Taijuan, you're not making this team. Work hard in spring training so we can trade you. But that's a big mark there. It also means that if there's any other guys in the minors that you're looking at as like these long relief guys, that maybe they get their shot, it's probably not likely. Now, I did bring up the Michael Mercado thing as filling in that final spot in the bullpen. He is a unique case because the Phillies have also used him in a bullpen role that's not like long relief, and he's done that in the minors once or twice. There could be minor league arms or guys on minor league contracts that end up getting that final spot in the bullpen, but I'd expect it to be a more short relief guy because, frankly, the way bullpens are used these days, guys don't throw all that much. So you're not looking at as many long relievers in major league bullpens like you've had in the past. In the past, you'd have 2 or 3 guys that could go 3 innings. Now it's just kind of like, okay, everyone's a 1-inning guy besides this one dude who's kind of a quasi-starter, which is the role that Joe Ross is in. But that's why Joe Ross is so important, because if Matt Strahm goes down, Jose Alvarado can eat those innings. If Orion Kerkering goes down, why am I forgetting Romano's first name? Romano can eat those innings, right? Like, you have those guys that can kind of overlap over each other. You don't have another long relief option to the level of Joe Ross. So Jordan Romano, there we go. It finally came to me. If Jordan Romano goes down, like Orion Kerkering can eat those innings, or vice versa as righties. Like, you're not looking at a situation where you have another Joe Ross major league caliber guy, and that's why he's super important for this team to keep healthy, have prepared for the season, and for him to be ready for a big role with this team. I don't know if we're going to love him or hate him, but Joe Ross is going to be a part of the 2025 Philadelphia Phillies story, no doubt in my mind. That's all for today's episode. Thank you so much for joining us. We're drawing closer to games. Saturday, the first spring training game. So we'll give you a preview of that one on Friday, but a lot of stuff to break into as the guys continue to get settled in spring training. Thank you so much for joining us. Again, we're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Please make sure, once again, you're rating and reviewing if you're listening to this in podcast form, and subscribe to that YouTube channel, Locked On Phillies. Get your notifications when new episodes are posted. Free, easy, really helps me out, helps you out. It's a win-win for everybody. Why wouldn't you do it? I appreciate everyone who's already done that and everyone who's going to. You have my heart if you're subscribed to Locked On Phillies, your family. So I appreciate that very much. Sound a little bit like Vin Diesel from Fast and Furious there. But all right, let's wrap it up. That's all again for today's episode, and I will talk to you tomorrow on the next episode of Locked On Phillies.